Guys, welcome. I think today we are going to talk about chapter 2, and we have a new guest amongst us. It's Nadine. And why don't we start with a quick intro about Nadine, and maybe you can share your kind of introduction to Gita and a little bit about you.
Thank you, Shashank. So, okay, I think I'm practicing yoga now for the past 13 years. I started on a very physical level to practice yoga. And over the last 13 years, I got more and more, just through my physical experience, I got more in sync with myself, more centered with myself. So I could sense that it's not only my body that is taken on the journey with yoga, it's also my mind and my soul, so to speak. So, and over that time, of course, you touch upon the Gita a lot because it's for you at the basic, right? So, and I think I touched upon it with many times of my yoga teachers and my sister also because she's a yoga teacher herself. And so I heard here and there about it. I would never consciously read it up till now with you all together and reflecting on it. And maybe I can just share when I started reading now this book that we are all having. The introduction was really profound to me because that puts the Gita really in that context of how we are in our life about to balance our body, mind, and soul, and how these three entities are sometimes out of balance, sometimes in balance. And I really loved this introduction to the Gita to really read that stories in a context that's benefiting our self-realization. I think that's what the chapter 2 also is about today. And
No, thank you. Thank you, Nadine, for joining us. I think it'll also bring a very unique perspective to our conversations because we have at least heard about Gita from very early on, and there are those biases. So it'll be very interesting to hear it from your perspective. All right. I think, we were talking about chapter 1 last time. And I think for me, at least what stood out after a week was the word dilemma. This is when you actually approach the book, when you find yourself in some kind of dilemma in life, as Arjun did in midst of a war. And I think chapter 1 in that way sets the context of the dilemma. And then we now talk about chapter 2. So it'll be really good to, maybe we can start with Gaurav to share your take on that chapter, and then we can go to the...
So initially it starts with Krishna being angry, I would say, at Arjun, the way it is being portrayed. And then,
But that's interesting that you read it that way. At least I didn't feel, but yeah, go ahead.
For the matter, in fact, I felt it that probably the way Arjuna dealt in the beginning was not the right way to deal with. Sorry, Krishna, how he dealt with Arjun.
Yeah, usually we as counselors are advised not to do that. You're not shamed and out of this.
Yes. So that was very contrasting for me. But what is happening is that and this whole thing about Arjuna asking him to be his teacher, and then I think he mellows down, and then he goes on to explain why he should do some things and where are it founded. So that is primarily how I saw it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe so for me, this second chapter, what really, if I just remember it now, is that you're not dead when your body is dead. I think this is the crux of this entire chapter, that your soul is part of a universal source and it's eternal. It's not dying because your body is dying. I think that was Arjuna's thing also, to get in this war or not, and killing these relatives or not whatsoever, but to realize that even if you're leaving your body, your life is this, maybe this part of your soul journey may be over. This personality that you built in this life, that may be gone, but your soul is going on. Like it's everywhere. Like for me, this was very coming from a Christian background. I found that like that's resonating deeply with me because, and not because I want to believe that, because it's more comforting that your soul may just leave that body, as I think it's described you're shedding a skin and then you may go to another level, right?
Yeah.
And I truly feel that, because we also, or maybe you can also share if you had any experiences in your life where you just know something which you couldn't know. You know, it's just something, you have an inner wisdom, you have an intuition about things that you just couldn't know, or you've never experienced it in this lifetime, right? But somehow it reminds you of something. So, and all these subtle things that I experienced throughout my life, they're just coming down to what is written there, because I never felt really that life is over when you die. You know, that's why, like, I think in this Western society or Christian society, a lot of people are so scared about death. But, and I couldn't say that I'm probably not, because I'm conditioned that way, but I always felt that there's more to it, that your life isn't over in that sense. Like maybe that physical worldly life you're leading, but the soul journey is going on. And I found that really beautiful. And I think this is what Krishna also wants to teach Arjuna in that second chapter, or to let him know. And bringing this now inside us, what I find also so profound, Krishna is not a God outside you that you're looking up. You're not seeking for someone externally. Krishna is that wisdom within yourself, and you can always get advice if you are able to connect with yourself deeply. Then you will just know. So
Yeah,
that's
I think
what it is about.
we did touch about that part around Krishna being our inner guide in our last conversation, and it's very interesting. Like for me, like I think, you know, for me, it felt like a very strong chapter, like in the sense there was a lot of information in there, because I felt it can be read very literally, but since I feel I've been on this path for some time, and I could feel it's actually a lot more instructive than actually like, how do I say this? So instead of this like being more moral and cliche, it feels like a very handbook kind of a thing for me, like a map, because it's talking about how do you know you are on this path, right? How do you know you are actually now going to be enlightened, right? And so obviously those are like strong things, but even just that reference on the chapters around how you can withdraw from your senses, how you would know, right, that you started following this path, was very interesting personally for me. Apart from obviously, the initial introduction on how this life is indestructible, right? Like I also come from a Vipassana school of thought, so I think that message resonates a lot for me, because that is another thing. Vipassana is fundamentally talks about how everything is going to get destroyed in the physical world, but then basically it's saying the same thing, that you are not destructible. That's the duality in some ways, right? But yeah, I'll leave it there and let Kabir tell us more about his understanding of the chapter. And then maybe we can come to this question of, this duality.
Sure. So the name of the chapter is actually Sankhya Yoga in Sanskrit, right? And Sankhya was early considered one of the oldest philosophical treatises on which yoga has built up. So all the yogas that we talk about today, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, etc., are ways to unite and experience that oneness, not just talk about it. But Sankhya is the way you would explain the philosophical part of it intellectually. So that's why Krishna starts in his response starts with Sankhya Yoga for about 20 odd shlokas. And what Nadine said and Shashank said, that he kind of, the basic message to Arjuna is he's trying to, in fact, bring him to a higher perspective. Don't just worry about what you're seeing in the phenomenal world, these bodies and you and them as different people, and come to a higher perspective. So Krishna is reminding Arjun that I know him, I know you for so many years, since childhood he knew Arjun. That you have these tendencies to resist injustice, and just because now on the side of injustice is your relatives, you are giving up your duty. If it was someone else, you would have gone and killed them straight. But just because these are your relatives, you are actually allowing injustice. And what kind of example you are setting? You will bring shame to yourselves, and to, people are going to say, okay, so it's injustice if it's not family. If it's family, then they are forgiven. So don't be a hypocrite. Do your job. Be more authentic. That's how I understood it.
Very good way of understanding. I think just drawing on from what we discussed, the corporate dilemmas that you face, right? Same example, continuing with the first episode where we discussed, where if you have to fire some, right? Now you have to then think not just about the person, the sinner, but also the deed, right? And if the deed is wrong, basically, right? If you will not basically accept it with anybody else, then why do you accept with that person, right? So then it actually resolves a lot of dilemma, at least starts resolving a lot of dilemma on that side, right? So it absolutely makes sense.
And especially Krishna, because taking the Sankhya background, is again and again telling Arjun not to be too particular about people, because this is just very temporary what people are doing. But those actions and those intents and those sanskaras, they are way beyond this body, mind, and this lifetime. So focus on that. Keep that higher perspective, what Gaurav just said. Focus on the deed, focus on the intent. And if you allow those things to continue, they will, those ideologies will spread. If these people rule the kingdom, their way of being will be accepted by masses. They would be the heroes. And by staying silent in this injustice, you are allowing this injustice to
complete parlance, what you call, so if you're killing your culture, right?
Yeah.
So by allowing one person who you probably thought you will let go of his wrong deeds or the things that should have been right, if they're wrong.
Yeah, you are making a statement. You are making a statement for everyone that I don't stand. I don't accept this.
Dean wanted to say something, but I will also just add a context. So somehow, I found this, that I'm very aggressive in terms of talking. Like mostly in Indian setups, you will have to be a little more aggressive when you have to voice your opinion.
Sorry.
No.
I'm just waiting for the moment, because what I fear what would be important to do is, because it's really hard for the mind when you're reading the text to understand that this is happening within yourself. So I love the example Kabir gave with that activist and the uncle and all that, but that is again like going into an outer example that you are Arjuna, someone else is Krishna, and someone else is this. So how that entire process look like if it's within us? So what is the struggle within us where that Krishna voice comes on top and discusses? Because then I think I'm seeing this not as a directive thing, like you're not getting to heaven if you don't achieve that Gita, probably that's my interpretation right now, offers you a way of understanding your inner world and set yourself free from your, how shall I say, your compulsory conditioned patterns of thinking, So I think Krishna is a voice in us that actually tries to give us a path to set us free. So how would that entire scenario look like now? Like, can we bring that into a inner level with an example? Like, I don't have this example right now, but I thought maybe we can try to see how would that look like within one person itself.
I think we answer, but I'll add just a small point, because we did talk about this last time, which was till there is that clear voice, right? Voice is there, but you might not be hearing it, or It might not have that much strength in the sense of clarity for it to, like, for you to really hear it. Until that point, you can find that voice sometimes from outside, right? Where a guide shows up. So that's just some context, in terms of that even though Krishna is inside us, we have not developed our intuition basically to that level where we follow that intuition very clearly that, okay, we have the answer from inside. And I think that's what you're asking, but then how do you use that into day to day, right? So Kabir, maybe you can help us with that.
I agree with both of you actually. So yes, even when we find a guide, and like I mentioned last time, the guide could be a YouTube video or a book or a person or a counselor or a friend, right? And a statement comes. But in case of spiritual insights, it's not so much, oh, I have never heard this or never thought this. It's more like you already knew at some level this is true. You just wanted it heard from someone and it gets validated. And I myself feel with Nadine so many times. That's why I tell her that she's like my counselor also, because she has very good ability to, put things in perspective. Then I say, yeah, that's what I meant. She's able to put it better. So that way. So I feel that is one thing where, yes, you can hear it from outside, but it feels more like a validation because you already knew it in your heart. And yes, hearing it from outside, sometimes it's like a reminder. We are very grateful for that. Sometimes it just brings that clarity, which gets our intuition can get foggy because of, our constantly chattering mind and all. I want to touch on one more thing. I don't know if it is a question or not, but I thought it was really important. There is a term in this chapter introduced for the first time called Swadharma in Sanskrit. So he says that if you don't follow your dharma, and then he talks about all that, how bad that is. So I just it has been really misused, I feel, in so many other contexts by people, where people say, hey, you're a businessman, that is your dharma. You're a student, that is your dharma. You are in military, so that is your dharma. I feel that it's not so much, so much based on our phenomenal roles. And I feel it changes also in different contexts. So it's more subtler than that. It's more like intuition in us. So if you're not doing your dharma, so if you're called for in your heart to speak against injustice, and if we are basically not acting on it, you would feel that you are feeling heavy, that you are suffering, and that is also a hell. That is almost a metaphor for hell, right? So if you don't act on your longing, on your inner voice, I don't want to say the voice or longing. There's another term. Can someone help me? There is something very, sorry?
Inner calling.
Inner calling is a better word, yes. So if you don't express your inner calling, then you suffer. That is what is happening with Arjun. And that is what Krishna, through different arguments, is trying to show him, that you are, come to this higher perspective and then allow that inner calling to express. If you don't do that, you would be feeling like you're in hell right now. And you would be in the state of aversion, which will actually take you to hellish reality even after this birth. And if you express your inner calling, and that we are going to cover much more in the next chapter, in Karma Yoga, then it doesn't really, the result doesn't matter, right? Like one of the journalists I admire, he kind of said something, and somebody said, hey, how does it matter what you are saying in this context? Nobody's listening. 100 people are saying something else. He said, that doesn't matter. I just want people to know that there was someone there fighting for it, right? Whether you agree with this ideology or not, but the fact is, you do the right thing. You do what you feel inside your heart is the right thing. Whether you win or lose doesn't matter. But if you don't do it, if you don't act on it, then it will be hell. So I just wanted to go back and touch on it by saying that our dharma, swadharma, is our intuition. Nanak said it beautifully also. Nanak said something about somebody asked him a similar question, and he said, "Hukum rajai chalana, Nanak likhya." So hukum rajai chalana. Hukum is, he says, dharma, your dharma. Hukum ki raza se chalna. Sorry, I'm speaking Hindi. I'll come back. So he's saying that act according to hukum, act according to your dharma, right? And then in the second line, he says, Nanak likhya naal, which translates into Nanak is saying that where is that hukum, where is that dharma? He says it's written with you. It is written inside you. You would know intuitively. I don't have to tell you. Nobody outside has to come and tell you, hey, your dharma is Kshatriya, your dharma is business, your dharma is this. If you will not be following it, you won't be happy. You won't feel satisfied. That is the evidence. So I just wanted to highlight on Swadharma. That Swadharma is a feeling in your heart, an intuitive feeling that would help you, when you're following your Swadharma, you feel fulfilled. You feel you're on the right path. When you're not doing it, you feel heavy. You suffer.
I do have a follow-up question on, because this got just one I want to, because this is the same question, right? Like, where does hell and heaven exist? Are we trying to be guilting somebody? But there's an aspect around what other people will say, right? What your enemies will say. And if you can help me see that context also into this. So some parts, this answer explains to me some parts of that, right? Like hell part, at least hell, heaven, right? And if you don't follow your karma, then you will be anyways unhappy. But because there's this sticky part where sometimes you have to say, okay, don't listen to what everybody else is saying, right? That you have to follow what you have to do. But then we're also saying, okay, no, if you don't do this, then your enemies will dishonor you, the society will dishonor you. How will you live with that dishonor?
Although I think this question might, just adding on to that question, what Shashank has said. So one is obviously what people will say. But the second part is that I think Gita should actually tackle it in I know that it might be tackled in the future chapters, but what happens if you get too attached to your Swadharma, right? That you literally get blinded by your Swadharma.
Okay. All right. So
attachment to Swadharma also needs to be addressed somewhere.
Okay. Well, can I touch on Gaurav's point first, Shashank? But I have not forgotten your thing. So, see, it's like telling fire, what if you get attached with heat, right? Or telling, so on. So you can't, getting attached with Swadharma would be if Swadharma has become a concept or an idea to you. So if you start saying that, hey, I am an activist, I'm a businessman, and it is, so you are not in touch with your intuition, in fact. You are in touch with an idea of who you are. And then, yes, then you can get attached with it. And in fact, then you are disconnected from Swadharma. That's the paradox. So if you stay connected with your Swadharma, means if you stay intuitive, that's why I said it need not be a same thing for life. Arjun can be a warrior at 25 and can be a Gyan Yogi or a Bhakt at 35, right? So your Swadharma can keep evolving, would keep evolving. So you can't get attached with Swadharma, but yes, you can get attached with the idea of Swadharma. It may be getting outdated and you're not dropping it. Yes? So, yeah. And coming back to Shashank's question, that is a bit tricky. Why I say that? Because even if you listen to what Krishna is saying, going ahead after explaining the Karma Yoga, he's talking about a free man, and he's saying a free man doesn't care about, getting fame or getting disrespect or profit or loss. He's same in pleasure, pain, profit, loss, fame, respect, disrespect. It doesn't affect him. But on one hand, he's talking to Arjun that, hey, see what kind of, you will bring disrespect to yourself, and how can you live with that, right? So again, I would say there are two aspects in this communication. From time to time, I feel, and that I've seen in Bible also or Bhagavad Gita also, that from time to time you feel the interaction is very much at a human level, right? So he's talking to you as a person, and he knows Arjun as a friend, as from since childhood, and he starts talking from a very phenomenal level also. That Arjun, I know you care about what people think also, and later you are going to say this also. That see, now people are shaming me, Krishna, right? So he's just touching on that part as well. But at the deeper level, maybe I've already said that, but I'm repeating myself, that at a little deeper level, he is in fact, Arjun was a hero to so many people, right? So that aspect, Krishna is very well aware that you are a heroic, warrior, and there are implications. If you act in ways, it is like we talk about some of the heroes today, celebrities and all, that they should be more careful about what they say and what they do, because so many people get affected by that. So that part resonates with me more. And that's why I said, Shashank, it's tricky, because I'm not in a position to know the entire context, just like about the feminism part. I agree with you. I also feel that is not the highest place to operate, for anyone to worry about what people are thinking. And why would Krishna, who's supposed to be our inner voice, saying that in this case? So yes, I know I'm not exactly answering it, but that's how I understand.
I'd like to add just one line here, is that there's a context of Arjun and Krishna, Krishna knowing Arjun since childhood.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
So probably in that moment, Krishna also is not Krishna, as we call him.
Oh, I see. So he's operating from a more personal space, is what you are saying.
More personal space. A god should not always be a god, right?
Yeah, I mean, in even in Bible, Jesus was known to lose temper and kick the tables and lose temper on people at times. And Buddha has become very riled up at times, when especially in the casteist discussions. And he got really mad at a Brahman, saying, Brahman, I will tell you how you are so similar to dog. All the Brahmins are so similar to dogs, and using such language which we don't associate with them. So they are, so these texts, I guess, I think Gaurav is right. And I've seen that with the Rumi also. Rumi, the great Sufi, that in one of his poetries, he's talking as a person and he's saying, oh God, why have you abandoned me? Come on. And in the other hand, he's saying, where is me? Where is God? There is just oneness. There is no one. There is no prayer. So back to back.
And even so, just thinking on just taking the same concept where Krishna is changing roles. So basically, or it seems he's changing roles. Right.
Or is it that advice is coming from the phenomenal aspect and then from a more physical aspect of the world, right? Is there that the duality, that one coming from that phenomenal, saying that, okay. Yeah, and then one is...
Yeah, that's how, Shashank, we kind of understand even when they talked about women, because we knew how, we all know Mahabharata a little bit. So in Mahabharata, they actually allowed guys to put their wife for the game of dice, right? Sorry?
He was allowed to be disrobed.
Yeah, disrobed. So status of women was pretty low at that time, because women were like, Nadine wants to say something, but you need to unmute, Nadine.
Yeah, I just want to say, coming back again, this entire story is about our inner self, right? I mean, of course, we can talk about feminism and all that stuff. I'm full in with that if we're looking at this as a real life scenario between many people. But if we're looking at this within one person, isn't it also then about the duality, the feminine and masculine energy within yourself? What do you consider as your weakness? What do you consider as your strength? From which aspect are you living in this world, which is definitely dominated by masculine traits? And I'm not saying by men, although that we can also discuss obviously in a broader, but even women in our society, we're rather living those masculine features of ourselves than the feminine ones, because they are more considered, to be strong, and you need to get your things through and all of that. And now I'm not distinguishing between gender, between people, but in ourselves. So I think what is described here is also a struggle we are having within ourselves, because somehow we feel that, like with women, we are connecting something emotional. Maybe in some terms, it's kind of seen like a weakness or whatsoever. So how is that coming out in ourselves with each of us, no matter if you're man, woman, or whatever you define as? So I think that is also important perspective to bring in.
Very well said.
Thank you. I think it keeps reminding us also that a lot of it we should not take literally, but see metaphorically. So that is very important. We don't lose that perspective. Thanks, Adi.
Definitely. I would like to just talk about a specific passage now. Like, I think for me, this was the introduction to Gita. I think we'll relate, but I'll at least, so let me ask, like, have you heard this phrase, Gaurav and Kabir, like, karm karo, phal ki ichha mat karo? This is something, at least for me, was as a small child introduction to Gita, which translates for you, Nadine, that do the work, don't wish for the fruits of that work, right? So this was, at least in my head, the translation for this. And as I read the Gita, I think it has changed now. But Nadine, have you heard of this phrase by any chance, like as somebody who is not brought up in India?
Don't be attached to the results so much, Nadine. That's what Shashank is asking you. Have you heard that when you're growing up, that focus more on the present or the process, not so much on the result?
No, I mean, it was totally all conditioned around you doing something to get a result out of it. Not the success was definitely like what you would do it for. Like you would try to be as effective as possible to get a result. That's why when I read that also again, and I mean, not just now, I'm trying to practice this since many years now, that I'm doing things out of, like, the joy of your heart is your guide. So whatever you do, if joy is there, then you're on the right path. And if you're just doing it for a certain outcome, then we experience that thing of, okay, now I achieved it, but I don't feel it really. So what's next? Then we are never satisfied with any achievement, because we didn't go like this, the saying that the way is the journey. Like it's about the path you're taking and not what is coming out of it, right? So if you're climbing a mountain and only think about the peak, then you don't enjoy the journey walking up there. And then if you reached it, you'll feel like, okay, what is the next higher peak, the next higher peak, the next higher peak? You never get satisfied. That's why even managing or like achieving this so-called enlightenment, whatever that means for people, I think even that can be someone manages his mind or her mind to such an extent that you can not be affected by anything that's happening to you, then you may get so bored that you just do something else. Like, I mean, it's again, I don't think this is the ultimate satisfaction to be not bothered by anything any longer, because life is about going through ups and downs. And the point is, what's your response to it? Like, what are you taking out of it? What do you feel? Like, we're human beings. We are here to feel and experience life. And it's not just to be like neutral with everything. This is not enlightenment for me, at least. I want to like enjoy life, like with all what comes along with it, and see how I can respond to it. So it's not that it doesn't feel like I'm in a cage with my thoughts, with my mind. Yeah.
Like the reason I come to this is because I think, at least for me, I think now what we're talking is a more closer interpretation of what it meant. But Gaurav, I will love to hear like your, if you remember it, right? Do you remember your first understanding of this phrase when you heard this?
Obviously, all of us, especially in India, have been introduced to this concept like many a times. Many a times people have said it and really not it, I think, right? And it is more often than not used for consolation rather than discourse, right? I would say. But if you ask me my real understanding
I
of
want
this,
your real. I'm not looking for a real understanding. I think it's very important because I think it took me a lot of time to get to the right interpretation. So I want to first address.
yeah. So if you ask me, the first understanding of this concept to me was consolation. So if you've not been able to win something,
Okay.
it's a consolation. But don't worry about the result. Worry about what you've been doing for the result. So it's a consolation, right?
Very interesting. Yeah, but for me it was not consolation. It was more okay that I don't have to wish for the outcome, right? Which I could never understand. Like how would and anything then? Like if I
Yeah.
okay, but because if I'm building a business, I do want it to grow. So for me, okay, I think it's already clear how we describe it. Like I said it, don't wish for the fruit. And I think when Kabir said it, I think he did a more better translation, which I now understand. But Kabir, like if you want to talk about, I think this will be very interesting for a lot of people that everybody hears this very differently, but there is a right interpretation of probably or
And I will try to be concise because we are going to spend maybe 15-20 minutes on it in the next session on Karma, because that is the crux of it. But it's the difference between craving versus desire. So if you don't desire, you are dead. Like Nadine said, you have to have desires. Even Buddha had desires. I want to go teach. I want to rest. I want to be in the sun. Being human, to feel and desire and express emotions and avoid certain things and do certain things. So it is very important to, that's why understand things in that context, because in this chapter, many times Krishna is saying, hey, pleasure and pain is same. No, they can't be same. What it really means is again that, yes, you are not shaken up by it. You have a higher perspective that, oh, it's phenomenal world and everything is changing. So craving is something that we want to become a pilot and we are preparing for it. That is karmyo. But if we are only thinking about what if I don't become the pilot? What if that doesn't happen? What if I become sick a day before? Then we are a nervous wreck. We are not able to prepare for it and we are suffering. And those kind of cravings never also fulfill us, And in fact, what Krishna is saying is not to look for fulfillment in phenomenal world, no matter what the goal is. The purpose of phenomenal world is to express our intuitively express our sankharas, right? So yes, I would just paraphrase it by saying when we say don't wish for the result, it's more like don't be attached with the result is a better translation. Yes, of course you want a result. That's why you have come to the war. You want to win. That's why you're fighting. But don't be too attached. Don't keep thinking, what if I lose? What if I win? You are just supposed to fight. So come here. And yes, you will wish for the result. Yes, you have to wish for the result. You have to be sometimes very clear about what you want. In fact, even for manifestation to work, you have to be very, very clear what you want and what you don't want. But don't be attached with it. Have this higher perspective that, hey, all of this is phenomenal. And here I am, a formless being behind this. So that kind of blesses the whole thing and make things lighter. And then the paradox of it is the less attached we are, which most materialist people do not agree, in fact, who have not experienced this. The less attached you are with the result, the more effective you become in your action. So that's why I think, Nati, please go on.
No, Kabir, just on that line, I wanted to add, you will also be surprised what other results you can achieve if you're not so focused and attached with one. Maybe something unexpected that you don't know will come out of it, because our mind only knows what happened in the past. That means we're forming our goals of what we want to achieve based on past experience. So if we're not attaching ourselves so much to that particular outcome, we may be surprised and achieve something else. And I have these moments very often where I'm so happy about it that I got surprised by the outcome and I'm so joyful about it. So I think that openness also brings you more feeling at the end with that bliss. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much.
You have any question, Nadine, Gaurav? Yeah.
I have one question. So basically, in the same context, at least in Eknath's Gita, he's talking about people taking delight in the letter of law. saying that there is nothing else, right? I could not, I understand it metaphorically, right? But what is Krishna trying to say? He's talking about it's in the same context he's talking about it actually, where he's saying that the people get too delighted by the letter of the law and there is nothing else. I could not understand it, so I'm not sure if you've read that part in the book, or did you?
For example, Gaurav, there have been laws of land in countries like blacks can't vote, women can't vote. They were law, and it was illegal for them to vote. Sometimes law and justice are two different things. Injustice can be a law, right? And so maybe he was hinting there.
When he's starting, so this occurs when he's starting to. But what you've said is right. What you and Shashank have said is right. Actually, it's just about the law of the land might be that don't kill your relatives. But then in that point in time, what is justice, right? So I think he starts with this actually. So that's why it just stood out for me.
And yes, I mean, justice is a very intuitive thing when you know, and this is what comes in so many practical ways, whether to bribe, not to bribe, and it has to be put in so many of these contexts when we operate, right? What is the law? And I just want to add this here, maybe just take a minute and add this, that I feel sense of justice and morality is considered really, really, really important on our inner journey on a spiritual path, but not the law or technicality, never. Right. So if you feel that you are being unjust or unfair to someone, and your intuition would tell you if you are centered and connected with it, and you are still doing that because you have phenomenal level greed or fears, then again, we are going to hell in the metaphorical terms. You would feel you're not honoring your intuition and you would suffer. So being just is really, really important on our inner journey. But being on the right side of the law, like Krishna said, that is, it depends. Sometimes justice and law can be on the same side. Sometimes they are not.
Yeah, and I probably thought of it now thinking about it actually, is that you can't just take escape of law, right, to do what is just. Some like just building on to what you just said, right? Law and justice probably might not be.
Or rather, may I say, I'm sorry to interrupt, that you can't use law sometimes to justify your injustice. That I'm not breaking the law, I'm doing the right thing. But even though it's exploitation, it's lawful. And we know at intuitive level we are exploiting, and we say, hey, I'm not breaking any law.
Yes. So I think that's where it is talking about. And because it starts at the context where Arjun is still in dilemma and he's just beginning his speech, and Arjun is thinking whether it is right to kill. So probably the law of the land said that you can't kill your family, right?
I suppose.
Killing others is okay. And he's saying, don't take escape of the law, but because then you are doing injustice to the justice, like you said, right?
I think this is a very important concept. We talked about law and justice. It's really important.
Nandin, do you have any questions before? Otherwise we can go to Kabir. And if Kabir wants to maybe talk about any certain theme within the chapter.
Now, I think I'm just really excited now that we'll be entering Karma Yoga. Like I said, this chapter was more of, what Krishna is going to get into. The therapy is going to more start. It's going on, of course, but this is more like an outline. And now I think this is now from chapter 3 onwards is more like a handbook where he's going into practicality. Yes.
So my last question actually on this, and somewhere in the ending part of this, when he's talking about people when Arjun wants to understand who are these people, right? How do you know that these are people who are one or are on the right path? He talks about that they live free from lust, fear, and anger when he's talking.
Yes.
Arjun is explaining.
Yes.
Now, free from lust, fear, and anger,
Yes.
inherently to me does not feel right, because now there's a contradiction, right?
Yes.
We just talked about being worldly,
Yeah.
being in be enjoying the worldly pleasure without being
Yes.
attached to it. But
Yes.
then here he's clearly saying that the people who are at a higher level do not
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy.
do not worry about it. They are not bothered about, are not affected by lust, fear, or anger.
Yeah, I would be happy to touch on that actually. That's pretty good. So again, it is similar to the differentiation between desire versus craving. And again, this is a lot gets lost into translation of Sanskrit of thousands of years old, and the English words equivalents. So when we hear lust or calm, we kind of in today's world we think, okay, any sexual desire. Mostly we use the term lust, right? But in this case, when he says lust, actually it doesn't mean sexual desire at all. It means, again, that energy of craving, that I have to have that in order to be fulfilled, to be complete. So that it is more like the term they are using for calm. So yes, when you are staying as presence, when you realize your nature as the soul, you feel joyful from within. So a lot of these things are good to have and optional, and you may want to have sex. You may want to, enjoy tasty food. Yes, you may fear a physical thing, a chariot coming towards Krishna. Krishna would have a response of fear, and he'll jump out and he'll feel pain and so on. When they are talking about fear, it is again with that energy where it's more like psychological aspect of it. What if this happens, and what if that happens, and what if my company doesn't succeed, and what if I lose the war? Because a free person knows they are more than body mind. So they don't have those psychological fears, right? And even the anger, for example, we have all experienced a very personal hate towards someone, a rage, which is which causes suffer, which burns us actually more than burning others. And we have all, the anger, what I'm talking about, Buddha or Jesus, when they saw injustice and they expressed anger. And I've seen, as in cases of my own spiritual guides, sometimes they expressing anger because it was required, and then winking a minute later and smiling. So they're not shaken up from within, but it doesn't like they are not able to express the emotion of anger. They can feel anger, but it's not hate or rage, and it's not personal. So these qualities, Gaurav, I understand more again. It's that same differentiation between desire and craving. And that is tricky. We have to keep clarifying. Otherwise, because even Shashank's question was similar. That, oh, if I don't want goal, why would I even do anything, right? And yes, it is tricky because these terms are not always explained in details. And that's why, in fact, it is advised that you read these texts, which are historically very old and language is very old, by someone who have really read it and lived it, right? So they can keep bringing it in right context. Like Nadine was doing a really good job. A couple of times she reminded us that it's metaphorical, and let's not go into, too much of the story part of it, and see how it relates to us. So yeah, that has been my understanding. I'm pretty confident after having spent so many years that these interpretations, what I just shared, I feel are closer to the intent, because many other things Krishna would say kind of validates that point.
Nadine, I see you are back. So do you have anything you want to ask? I do have something I want to share, but before that, if you want to ask something.
No, I mean, I found it just really profound to get to the level that you really put this inside yourself and then see what it means, that self-realization, what path you actually want to take, and what we discussed about duality, about the cravings, the desires, because I think the introduction of the book also gave a perspective on desire in the sense that, yeah, it is important to have desire because our mind is there to grow or to experience, discover new things. But the art in it is not with attachment or craving, like what Kabir also mentioned. And I think this is a practice in which we can grow spiritually towards ourselves, but not like to become neutral about things. Because enlightenment, as I said earlier, it doesn't mean for me to be neutral, not affected by anything in this world anymore. For me, it's still to experience it, but to become aware of these nuances where you go into a mind cage and where your mind is actually free. So I think that was chapter out for me on our discussion.
Before Shashank, you conclude, I think that's where it is going towards. I would like to say it in like absolute layman terms, and all are assuming that our listeners are going to be across all spectrum. So Gita probably is not talking about asceticism, leaving your what it is as, right? It's just so we should not read the literal text and understand, but rather go into the deeper understanding, and that's why we're taking these podcasts.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very fair point. It actually literally says it that there's one shloka which literally says it that we're not talking about that. I actually
that's and I can relate it to it because that's what color for me. Right?
Yeah.
So there are translations which will talk about it, which will probably dwell a lot about what Krishna is saying and what is right and what is wrong, right? But you need to look at it from a duality point of view, so to say.
I was actually not concluding. I wanted to share a very personal story here. So bear with me for a little more time, but I think it's an interesting story. So I actually mentioned last time I read the whole book in one reading, but before that I took up the book and I read it probably, once, and I got stuck on this one passage, which is about the passage we discussed actually. And I was reading the book and I think it's passage 42, 43 in chapter 2. And it shook me actually because I read it and I could not go further after that. So I just simply, I was reading pretty fast and then I just read that passage, which is about selfless action and you have to, not like you have to do action. The passage we talked about, right? And you don't have to focus, you don't have to get attached to the outcome of it. But then the interesting part was that I think I came and I was reading this in a flight. I could not read it. And then I came back. Then there was a newer party and we were drinking. And all I can think about is this passage while I'm drinking and while everybody around me is celebrating. So this was very interesting for me that passage had a huge impact on me. I kept that as a status, my WhatsApp status for a few days. And interestingly, when I read this again this time, I somehow got more out of it. Because at that time, this was probably a year back, it meant something else because that part is the part I was not properly doing it correctly. I was getting too attached to the outcome of my business. And that time I read it like that. And this time I was talking, it says about it really talks about inaction, right? Like you can't, like karam karo, right? Act. So now suddenly that itself was very powerful that, okay, you can't really take out, right? You can't escape your, whatever is going to come to you in this life. You have to actually act and get that. So for me, that was very powerful that if you read this again, suddenly something which is already very impactful on the first reading, I could see a different word in that passage and it became very impactful for me in my current state of life. So that's what I want to leave with. But if anybody wants to add like a summary of this, but for me, this chapter will always be about that phrase, that shlok, which is you don't have the right to the fruit. You have the right to work. Like it's kind of your duty to act, but you don't really have the right to the fruit of that outcome. And you have to do it from a place of Srit Pragya, right? You have to do it from a place where it doesn't, not from a place of attachment or aversion, basically. So.
No, thanks for sharing. I think that's beautifully summarizes also so much of what you were sharing. So nice place to end our discussion. And I guess we'll reconnect soon for chapter 3. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much, all of you. See you. Bye-bye.